My name is Aria Lennox, and I'm 32 years old. 12 years ago, my life shattered in a way I never saw coming. I was just 20, standing in the polished living room of our family's Boston brownstone, my heart pounding with hope. I'd just told my parents I was dropping out of law school to pursue music. I expected disappointment, maybe an argument, but what I got was so much worse. My father, Dexter Lennox, a towering figure in Boston's legal world, stared at me like I was a stranger. His voice was ice cold as he said, "You're a failure, Aria, a broken dreamer who'll never be one of us." My mother, Lillian, stood by the fireplace, her eyes fixed on the floor. She didn't say a word, and her silence cut deeper than any insult. My older sister, Vera, leaned against the doorway, her lips curling into a mocking smile. "You? A musician?" she sneered. "You're just chasing a childish fantasy." I stood there, clutching my decision like a lifeline. But their words tore through me. I'd grown up in their world of elite galas, tailored suits, and perfect appearances. The Lennox family was a dynasty of lawyers, and I was supposed to carry that torch. But music, it was my oxygen, my escape, my truth. I thought they'd at least try to understand. Instead, that night, they turned their backs on me. Dexter's voice echoed as he pointed to the door. "If you choose this path, you're no longer a Lennox. Leave." Lillian's eyes stayed down, her hands trembling slightly, but she didn't stop him. Vera laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that followed me as I grabbed my guitar case and walked out into the cold Boston night. The rain soaked through my jacket, but the sting of their rejection burned hotter. I was alone, with nothing but my dreams and a heart full of hurt. But something else sparked inside me that night, a quiet, stubborn fire. I wasn't going to let their words define me. I was going to prove them wrong. Not for them, but for me. 12 years later, I wasn't the broken college dropout they'd cast out. I'd built something they could never imagine. Before I go on, I want to hear from you. What city are you listening from? And what's a moment when someone made you feel like you weren't enough? Share it in the comments. Because your story matters here. Your voice matters. That night in Boston still haunts me. I can still see the chandeliers glow. The way Dexter's eyes hardened. The way Lillian's silence screamed louder than words. Vera's laughter was the final blow. Each chuckle a reminder that I was an outsider in my own family. I left with a single bag and a guitar, stepping into a world that felt impossibly big and terrifyingly small all at once. But I carried a promise to myself. I'd make it, no matter what it took. That night I walked away from my family's Boston brownstone. I didn't just leave behind a house, I left behind a version of myself I no longer recognized. With my guitar slung over my shoulder and rain dripping down my face, I boarded a bus to Los Angeles, chasing a dream that felt like my only lifeline. Los Angeles was a shock. I landed in a cramped studio apartment, the kind where the walls seemed to close in at night. The city hummed with ambition, but it was also ruthless. I was 20, broke, and alone, with no one to lean on. To pay rent, I took a job as a bartender, pouring drinks for dreamers like me who were all trying to make it. Every night, I'd come home smelling of whiskey and exhaustion, but I'd pull out my laptop and teach myself music production, YouTube tutorials, free software, stolen moments between shifts. Those were my teachers. The rejection from my family clung to me like a shadow. Dexter's words, "You're a failure," echoed in my head on the hardest days. Lillian's silence felt like a betrayal I couldn't shake. And Vera's laughter? It was a knife that twisted every time I doubted myself. But that pain, it became my fuel. I wasn't just working to survive, I was working to prove I was enough. Not to them, but to me. My first break came when a small coffee shop hired me to write a jingle for their radio ad. It wasn't glamorous, $200 for a 30-second tune, but when I heard my music on the air, my heart raced. It was the first time I felt like I belonged. I started hustling harder, reaching out to indie artists, offering to produce their tracks for next to nothing. Some said no, others ignored me, but a few said yes. Those late nights in makeshift studios, tweaking beats until my eyes burned, were when I started to find my voice. I remember one night, sitting on my apartment floor, surrounded by empty coffee cups, When a song I'd produced for a local rapper hit 10,000 streams. It wasn't much, but to me, it was everything. I cried, not out of sadness, but because I was starting to believe in myself. I took online courses, learned sound engineering, and saved every penny to buy better equipment. Failure wasn't an option, not because I wanted to rub it in my family's faces, but because I had to show myself I could do this. By 28, I'd landed a gig producing tracks for a rising indie label. I soaked up every lesson, every missed note, every failed mix, every client who pushed me to be better. I was no longer the scared girl who left Boston. I was becoming someone new. Then, 3 years ago, I took the biggest risk of my life. I founded my own music platform. A place where indie artists could share their work without gatekeepers. It was terrifying. Investors doubted me. Competitors scoffed. And self-doubt crept in more times than I'd like to admit. But I kept going. My team grew. My platform thrived. And last year, it hit a valuation of $60 million. $60 million. I'd gone from a college dropout with a guitar to a CEO whose name was in Billboard and Rolling Stone. My family? They had no idea. They'd written me off, erased me from their perfect world. But I wasn't erased. I was building my own. And then, out of nowhere, an invitation arrived. A cream-colored envelope with gold embossing. Addressed to me. The Lennox family's law firm was hosting a gala in Boston to celebrate 30 years. My past came rushing back, their voices. Their rejection. Their belief that I'd amount to nothing. Why were they inviting me now? Did they think I'd come crawling back? Begging for their approval? I wasn't that girl anymore. I was Aria Lennox, and I was ready to face them on my terms. That invitation to my family's gala sat on my desk for days, staring back at me like a challenge I couldn't ignore. I booked a flight to Boston, my heart a mix of nerves and resolve, ready to step back into the world that had cast me out 12 years ago. The Boston Convention Center was alive with glamour when I arrived. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a golden glow over sleek suits and elegant gowns. The air buzzed with the chatter of Boston's elite, all gathered to celebrate the 30th anniversary of my father's law firm. I walked in wearing a tailored emerald dress, my hair swept up, my steps steady. I wasn't the scared 20-year-old they'd thrown out. I was Aria Lennox, the woman who'd turned their rejection into rocket fuel. Heads turned as I crossed the marble floor, my heels clicking with purpose. Whispers followed, but I kept my eyes forward, scanning for the family that had once defined my worth. I spotted Vera first, standing near a grand staircase, her role as director of communications evident in her poised smile and designer gown. Our eyes locked, and for a split second, her face froze. She recognized me instantly, Aria, the sister she'd mocked and discarded. I held her gaze, my expression calm but unyielding. Vera adjusted her necklace, pretending to laugh with the guest. But I saw her hands tremble. She hadn't expected me to show up, let alone walk in like I owned the room. I moved through the crowd, feeling her stare burn into my back. A man approached, his smile warm but curious. "I'm Ethan, Vera's husband," he said, extending a hand. I shook it, noting the genuine interest in his eyes. "You look familiar. Have we met?" he asked. I tilted my head, a faint smile on my lips. "Maybe in another life," I said, my voice steady but laced with meaning. Ethan's brow furrowed, but he didn't press. Instead, he gestured toward the bar. "Care for a drink?" I nodded, sensing a chance to plant a seed of doubt about his wife's perfect facade. As we walked, I caught sight of Dexter across the room. His broad shoulders squared as he charmed a group of men in suits. He hadn't seen me yet, but his presence stirred a knot in my stomach. Lillian stood beside him, her practiced smile masking the tension I knew she carried. They were the picture of success, heads of a legal empire, but I knew the cracks beneath their polished surface. I turned my focus to Ethan, keeping my tone light. "So, you're part of the Lennox legacy now?" I asked. He chuckled, unaware of the storm brewing. "Trying to keep up," he said. "Vera runs a tight ship." At the bar, I ordered a sparkling water, my mind sharp. A group of investors approached, their faces lighting up when I introduced myself as the CEO of a music platform they'd read about in Billboard. "Your work with indie artists is groundbreaking. one said, handing me his card. I thanked him, my confidence growing as their questions deepened. We talked about streaming trends, artist empowerment, topics Dexter would never touch. Vera watched from a distance, her smile faltering as she realized I wasn't just a guest. I was a player in a world she couldn't control. Ethan stayed close, asking about my platform. How do you get into music? He said, his curiosity genuine. I leaned in, my voice low. Sometimes, you have to break free from what people expect to find your own path. His eyes lingered on me, sensing there was more to my story. I didn't elaborate, letting the mystery hang. Across the room, Lillian whispered something to Dexter, her gaze flicking toward me. Dexter's jaw tightened as he finally spotted me, his eyes narrowing. I raised my glass slightly. A silent challenge. They thought they'd erased me. But here I was, commanding attention. The investors invited me to their table, eager to discuss a potential partnership. I joined them, laying out my vision for scaling my platform. Their nods and questions fueled my drive, each word a step toward dismantling the Lennox family's illusion of control. Vera hovered nearby, pretending to mingle, but I caught her stealing glances, her composure cracking. Ethan excused himself to check on her, and I saw them exchange hushed words. Lillian approached Dexter, her hand gripping his arm as they watched me hold court. Their unease was palpable, a crack in their perfect world. I didn't need their approval anymore, but I wanted them to see what they'd lost. The gala was just the beginning. I wasn't here to blend in. I was here to stand out, to show them the woman I'd become. And soon, they'd learn I wasn't done shaking their world. As I stood among the gala's glittering crowd, feeling the weight of my family's stares, I knew the moment I'd been waiting for was coming. The stage was calling, and I was ready to tell my truth. The MC announced a special guest speaker, and my name echoed through the Boston Convention Center. I took a deep breath, smoothed my emerald dress, and stepped into the spotlight. The room quieted, every eye locked on me, the hum of anticipation thick in the air. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady as I gripped the microphone. "Good evening," I said, my words clear and deliberate. "I'm Aria Lennox, and I have a story to share." The crowd leaned in, curious, unaware of the storm I was about to unleash. I paused, letting the weight of my presence settle over the room. This wasn't just a speech. This was the moment I'd carried for 12 years. I was raised in the shadow of a legacy. I began, my voice soft but piercing. A legacy that demanded I fit a mold I could never belong to. I was told I was a failure, a broken dreamer, because I chose music over a path that wasn't mine. Gasps rippled through the audience. I didn't name my family, not yet, but I saw Vera near the front, clutching her glass, her face pale, her eyes widened with panic, like she could feel the ground shifting beneath her. I continued, my tone steady but raw. They thought I'd fade away, a nobody who dared to dream differently. But here I am, leading a music platform that's changing the game for artists around the world. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others whispering. I caught Dexter's stare from the side, his fists clenched, his face like stone. The man who'd called me a failure looked like he'd seen a ghost. I didn't flinch. Success isn't about fitting in, I said, my voice rising with conviction. It's about standing up, even when those closest to you tear you down. The room erupted in applause, a wave of support that drowned out the tension radiating from my family. Vera's expression crumbled, her polished facade cracking. She pushed through the crowd, her heels clicking frantically as she tried to reach the stage. I kept going, undeterred. I'm here tonight, not for approval, but to remind everyone that your worth isn't defined by those who reject you. The applause grew louder, and I saw the investors from earlier nodding. Their interest peaked. Vera reached the steps, her voice sharp but shaky. "This isn't your place, Aria," she hissed, low enough that only I could hear. I met her gaze, unyielding. "It's exactly my place," I shot back, my words firm but calm. The crowd didn't hear our exchange, but they saw her tension, her desperate attempt to hold her ground. She froze, her face flushed, then retreated, her composure unraveling. Ethan, her husband, approached her, his brow furrowed with confusion. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone sharp. Vera brushed him off, muttering something about a misunderstanding. But he wasn't convinced. I stepped back from the microphone. The crowd still clapping, their energy electric. Ethan broke away from Vera and approached me as I descended the stage. "Aria, what did you mean up there?" he asked. His voice low but urgent. I leaned in, keeping my tone calm but pointed. "Ask your wife about the sister she never mentions," I said. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. He glanced back at Vera, who was now whispering to Lillian near the bar. Lillian's face was tight, her usual poise fraying. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, questions about my identity swirling. Dexter stood with Lillian, his jaw set, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and fear. They'd built their empire on control. But tonight, I'd cracked its foundation. I didn't need to say more. The truth was out, hanging in the air like a spark ready to ignite. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of theirs unraveling. As I stepped off the stage, the crowd's applause still ringing in my ears, I felt a fire inside me that wouldn't be extinguished. But what came next would shake me to my core and change everything. I moved through the gala, the buzz of my speech still electrifying the room. Guests stopped me to shake my hand, their words of admiration washing over me like a bomb. But my focus shifted when Elliot Sage, an old colleague from my father's law firm and one of my few allies, pulled me aside. His face was serious, his voice low. "Aria, there's something you need to know," he said, glancing around to ensure no one overheard. We stepped into a quiet corner near the bar. Elliot leaned closer, his words careful but heavy. "Your father, Dexter, he didn't just disown you. He tried to bury your career before it even started." My chest tightened, a cold dread creeping in. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. Elliot's eyes met mine. "When you left for LA, Dexter called major record labels. He told them you were unreliable, a talentless dreamer who'd embarrass anyone who signed you. He wanted to make sure you'd fail." The words hit like a punch. I'd known my father was ruthless. But this was a calculated betrayal, a deliberate attempt to crush my dreams. My hands trembled, but I kept my composure, nodding for Elliot to go on. "I overheard him back then," he said. "I didn't say anything because I thought you'd moved on. But seeing you tonight, you deserve to know." Before I could process the weight of his words, another figure approached, Nora, my best friend and a lawyer with a knack for uncovering secrets. Her eyes were sharp, her voice urgent. "Aria, it's worse than you think," she said, pulling out her phone. She showed me a document, a copyright registration for songs I'd written years ago. Songs I'd never released. The name on the registration? Vera Lennox. My heart stopped. Vera, my sister, had taken my music, my raw, personal creations, and claimed them as her own to build her social media empire. Nora scrolled through Vera's Instagram, where millions followed her as a music producer. My songs, my melodies, were the backbone of her brand. The betrayal cut deeper than Dexter's sabotage. This wasn't just rejection, this was theft. I spotted Vera across the ballroom, laughing with guests, her facade still intact. Ethan stood nearby, his face clouded with unease from our earlier talk. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Vera," I called, my voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. The room quieted, heads turning as I crossed the floor. She turned, her smile faltering as I approached. Ethan stepped closer, sensing the tension. "We need to talk," I said, my tone cold but steady. Vera's eyes darted to Ethan, then back to me. "Not here," she muttered, her voice tight. "Right here," I countered, loud enough for nearby guests to lean in. "You stole my songs, Vera. You built your entire brand on my work." Her face flushed, her hands shaking. "That's ridiculous," she snapped, but her voice cracked. Ethan frowned, stepping between us. "What's she talking about, Vera?" he asked, his gaze fixed on her. I didn't let her answer. "Nora found your copyright registrations," I said, my words sharp. "My songs, my heart, passed off as yours." The crowd around us grew silent, their curiosity palpable. Vera stammered, her composure unraveling. "You're lying," she said, but her eyes betrayed her. Ethan's expression darkened, his trust in her fraying. "Is this true?" he pressed, his voice hard. Vera looked away, unable to meet his gaze. I stepped closer, my voice low but relentless. You thought I'd stay gone. Vera, you thought you could take everything I created. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. The guests nearby whispered, their phones already out, capturing the drama. Ethan turned to me, his voice low. You're their daughter, aren't you? I nodded, my eyes never leaving Vera. The one they didn't want. I said. His jaw tightened, and he looked at Vera, who avoided his gaze. The air was thick with tension. The crowd now openly staring. Nora appeared at my side, her presence grounding me. You did it, Arya, she whispered. You're taking back what's yours. The Lennox family's secrets were unraveling, and I was the one pulling the threads. As the crowd's whispers grew louder and Vera's facade crumbled under the weight of my words, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The next morning, Boston woke to a firestorm. Nora, my fierce friend with a lawyer's instinct for justice, had taken the evidence of Vera's theft and Dexter's sabotage to the press. Headlines flooded the internet. Lennox law firm rocked by scandal, daughter's music stolen. Career sabotaged. Social media buzzed with clips of my gala speech, paired with Nora's leaked documents, copyright registrations bearing Vera's name. Emails from Dexter to record labels calling me a liability. The Lennox family's pristine reputation, built over decades, was unraveling faster than they could control. I sat in my hotel room, scrolling through the articles, a mix of vindication and quiet relief washing over me. The world was seeing them for who they were, not untouchable titans, but flawed, desperate people who'd tried to bury me. By noon, my phone rang. It was Marcus Tate, an investor I'd met at the gala. His voice was warm but direct. Arya, I've seen the reports, he said. Dexter's firm can't be trusted. I'm pulling my funding. My heart skipped a beat. But your platform, he continued, it's the future. I want to discuss a partnership. I leaned back, a smile tugging at my lips. I'd be happy to talk, I said, my tone professional but firm. Marcus's offer wasn't just a win, it was a direct blow to Dexter's empire. The man who'd tried to erase me was now losing the investors he'd courted for years. Across town, Ethan was grappling with the fallout. He'd spent the night replaying my confrontation with Vera, her evasions only deepening his doubts. In their sleek Boston penthouse, he faced her, his voice cold. You stole her music, Vera, he said, holding up his phone with Nora's leaked documents. And you never told me she was your sister. Vera's eyes widened, her usual confidence replaced by panic. It wasn't like that, she stammered, but Ethan cut her off. You lied to me, to everyone. He stepped back, his jaw tight. I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow, he said. I need to think about what this means for us. Vera sank onto the couch, her face pale, the reality of losing him hitting hard. The board of Dexter's firm, shaken by the scandal, voted to remove Vera as director of communications. Her name, once a symbol of their success, was now tied to theft and deceit. Later that day, Dexter called me. His voice was strained, a far cry from the commanding tone I'd known. Arya, we need to talk, he said. I agreed to meet him and Lillian at a quiet cafe near my hotel. When I arrived, they looked smaller than I remembered. Lillian's eyes were red, her hands clasped tightly. We're sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Dexter nodded, his face etched with regret. We made mistakes. Arya, come back to the family. We can fix this. I looked at them, the parents who'd once turned me away. Dexter, I said, my voice calm but unyielding. Lillian, you don't get to rewrite the past. You chose your empire over me. Lillian flinched, tears welling up, but I continued. I built my own life, my own company, without your name or your approval. I don't need you now. Dexter's shoulders slumped, his authority gone. We lost sight of what mattered, he admitted, but I shook my head. You lost me, I said, standing up. As I walked out, my phone buzzed with a message from Nora. The board is reviewing Dexter's leadership. She wrote, your story is changing everything. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. My platform was thriving, now valued at over $120 million. With new partnerships on the horizon, I'd become a beacon for indie artists. My name celebrated in the music world. The Lennox family's empire was crumbling. But mine was stronger than ever. I'd taken back my voice, my music, my truth, and I wasn't done yet. As I walked away from that cafe, leaving Dexter and Lillian behind, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a weight I'd carried for 12 long years. The Boston skyline stretched out before me, its lights twinkling under the morning sun. A reminder of how far I'd come since that rainy night I left my family's world behind. I stood in my Los Angeles office a week later, looking out over the city that had become my home. My platform was soaring, now valued at over $120 million. With new partnerships flooding in from the gala, I'd built something real, something mine, without the Lennox name or their rules. Across town, Dexter faced the wreckage of his empire. Major clients pulled out, citing trust issues after Norris' expose hit the news. The firm's stock plummeted, and whispers of bankruptcy circled boardroom meetings. Dexter sat in his office, staring at financial reports, his control slipping away with every lost contract. His calls to me went unanswered, each one a reminder of the bridge he'd burned years ago. Vera's world was collapsing too. Ethan filed for divorce, unable to move past her lies. "I trusted you," he'd told her, his voice heavy with betrayal. Before leaving their penthouse, the board removed Vera as director of communications, her name now synonymous with scandal. She dodged reporters, her social media accounts silent as former fans turned their backs. My sister, who'd once mocked my dreams, was now facing the consequences of her ambition. Lillian tried to salvage the family's image, hosting a press conference to call the scandal a misunderstanding. But the public wasn't fooled. Socialites who'd once flocked to her events distanced themselves, their invitations replaced by cold silence. She stood alone in their mansion, surrounded by the trappings of a life she'd fought to protect, realizing too late that her loyalty to Dexter had cost her everything. I felt no pity. Their choices had built this fallout, just as mine had built my future. I was 20 when they called me a broken dropout, a failure for choosing music over their legacy. But that rejection became my strength. Every late-night recording session, every song I poured my heart into, every pitch to investors led to this moment. I didn't just survive, I thrived. To everyone who's followed this story, thank you. Your support means more than I can say. I've learned that the past doesn't define you unless you let it. You can rise above betrayal, rebuild from nothing, and create a life that's yours alone. The lesson? Your worth isn't tied to those who hurt you, it's found in the courage to live true to yourself. Even when it's hard, that's where your power lies. What's your story? What's kept you going when the odds were against you? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Together, we can remind each other that our choices, not our circumstances, shape who we become.